From the outside, my life looked perfect Pinterest. Worthy dinners, a luxury house with curated playlists, perfect lighting, and number goals in every photo. But inside, I was slowly vanishing. Damon, my husband, called me his wife/employee. I paid the bills, planned the parties, smiled through the bullshit while he built a startup that never started, and turned my sunroom into his ego war room. He erased me one sarcastic comment at a time, smile more. That blazer's too harsh. You retired, maybe step back. He wanted a doll, not a wife, a bankroll, not a partner, but the night he laughed with his bro founders and called my holiday decor desperate. That was it. I stopped asking for respect and started preparing the exit. I moved money, collected receipts, hired a lawyer. The house was legally mine, he just never noticed. On New Year's Eve, he came home drunk from brunch. I stood at the door, calm, cold. "You've got 10 minutes to grab your laptop." He laughed, pleaded, yelled. I didn't blink. He left with nothing but confusion and a charger. I locked the door behind him gently. Finally, now I drink my wine in peace. I host the people I choose. I painted over the whiteboards and filled my sunroom with plants and music and breath. He said I wasn't the wife he envisioned. He was right. I became the woman I needed. And this is where I begin. I am Vivian Hart, 39, head of strategy at a marketing firm that just landed its 4th luxury client this year. I cover our mortgage, our travel, the groceries, the dinners out with his friends, and even the quarterly investments in whatever vague tech startup Damon swears is about to blow up. He says he's building something. I haven't seen a single invoice. Damon used to ask about my day. He used to call at lunch just to say, "Hi, leave notes on my desk before big meetings." But lately, all I get is commentary. On my wardrobe, my tone, the way I pronounce certain words during presentations. "That blazer makes you look a little severe. Babe, try smiling more when you pitch softer. Sells better. You sound tired when you talk about work. Maybe you are doing too much." It took me a while to realize that feedback was just a slower kind of erosion. Still, I smiled. Still, I cooked. Still, I planned his birthday dinner even after he forgot mine, because I believed in patience, in support, in weathering the storm together. Until the night of the dinner party, 6 guests, 2 bottles of Sancerre, and 1 too many laughs. Damon had just finished telling a story about a meeting that didn't actually happen. I knew because I saw the DoorDash receipt from that afternoon. And then, with his arm around me and a grin that didn't touch his eyes, he said, "Vivian's basically my CFO, therapist, and decorator. My wife/employee." The room laughed. I laughed too, automatically, like a reflex. But something shifted. Something subtle but seismic. I felt it in my spine the way my body tensed, but my face kept performing, a glitch in the script. A moment where the joke landed, but the mask cracked. Because here, as the truth, I wasn't his employee. I was his cover story. I footed the bills. I handled the logistics. I made the life look stable while he wandered, pivoted, networked. I hosted the dinners and wore the dresses and smiled in the photos. And all the while, I was disappearing slowly, gracefully, politely. That night, after the last glass was rinsed and the guests had gone home, I stood alone in the kitchen and replayed the laugh track in my head. The clink of forks, the echo of wife/employee. And I realized this wasn't a partnership. It was a performance. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending it was worth the ticket price. Sometimes the cracks dawn too start with shouting. They start with silence, long, slow, and internal. The kind that stretches across years and dinners and dreams you no longer recognize as your own. I used to live in Manhattan. I was 29, newly promoted to creative director at a boutique agency in Soho. I wore sharp blazers, took client meetings over matcha, and walked home alone under streetlights that made the city feel like it was humming just for me. Then, Damon had an idea, a pitch deck, a dream, a promise. "It'll be huge," he said. "But I need time. I need stability," so I moved. To be with him, to be for him. We picked this house together, the garden, the tiles, the kitchen backsplash I insisted on. I figured I'd find something local, something temporary, until he got the business off the ground. That was 7 years ago. Now I make 6 figures running brand strategy for people who wear recycled ambition. Like Is Couture, and Damon is still building. The cracks started showing again on a Tuesday. I was filing quarterly expenses and noticed a series of strange charges on our joint card. Not big, not extravagant, just off. $118. 43 a wine bar downtown. $450 a payment, labeled consulting fee Vision 8. $200 Venmo transfers to someone named Corey. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I wasn't looking for betrayal. I was looking for logic. That night, while I was slicing rosemary for the chicken he liked, I asked, "Hey, what's Vision 8? I saw the charge, some kind of consultant." He didn't look up from his phone. "I told you already. It's part of the strategy rollout research. You never listen." His tone was flat, that low thrum of dismissal dressed as patience. Like I was the one stirring conflict by asking about our money. My money? I said nothing, just plated the chicken, set the table, poured the wine. But my hands moved differently that night. Not with love, not with ease, with routine. Like someone performing an old role she no longer auditioned for. Later, I opened our bedroom window, just a crack. Let the air in. I stood there in silence while Damon snored on the other side of the bed. His arm draped across the duvet, like a man who had nothing to fear. I thought about the creative director I used to be, the woman who pitched global campaigns and flew to Berlin on 48 hours' notice. The woman who didn't flinch at a boardroom challenge, but now second-guessed whether she was overreacting about a $450 charge. I still cooked, still folded his sweaters the way he liked. But something inside me was watching, documenting. Not because I was ready to leave, but because I had begun to remember myself. The shift wasn't sudden. It was slow. So slow it almost looked like compromise. At first, it felt like little things. Damon's friends began stopping by during work hours, then staying the whole day. Laptops open, shoes kicked off. My house became their co-working retreat, complete with oat milk lattes I bought and Wi-Fi I paid for. "It's just temporary," Damon said. "They helping me shape the product vision, but temporary became constant. And soon, my sunroom, the one room I'd claimed as mine, the one with light-drenched windows and shelves of creative books I'd collected over a decade, was overtaken. My desk, my candle, my prints gone. In their place, a long folding table. His whiteboard, markers I hadn't bought. I came home from a client offsite one evening and found my vision board in the recycling bin. Half torn. Dreams I'd pinned there years ago, a photo of the Amalfi Coast, a quote about reclaiming time, a sketch of a studio space all tossed aside. In their place, his whiteboard covered in messy diagrams labeled revenue funnels, affiliate loops, and Q3 breakouts. My sunroom had been converted. Quietly, without permission. I stood there for a long moment, not saying a word, just looking. Later that week, we had guests over, some of his startup friends, the ones who always smelled faintly of Red Bull and rationalizations. I refilled the wine, passed the charcuterie. When I spoke, Damon cut in with a laugh and said, "That's just Vivi talking. Don't mind her, she overthinks everything." Vivi. He knew I hated that name, had told him so. More than once, but around others, he used it freely like a leash. Like a joke only he could make. It softened me in their eyes, made me seem dramatic, delicate, small. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Damon snored lightly beside me. I began texting myself notes, passwords, spending habits, names of people he mentioned in passing. I started hiding certain receipts in the bottom of my bag. Nothing criminal. Just patterns. Evidence. I brought it up in therapy. My therapist, a woman with kind eyes and a spine of steel, listened carefully. She didn't interrupt. Then she said something that stopped me cold. What if you were not crazy? What if he's just an artist of control? I sat there blinking. Because it was a diagnosis. It was a mirror. I had spent so long adjusting myself, my tone, my timing, my expectations. I hadn't noticed how small I'd become. How well trained, how politely erased. He hadn't screamed, he hadn't struck, but he had redesigned my life. One room, one nickname, one passive comment at a time, and now I was quietly archiving it all, not because I was ready to fight back. Not yet, but because I had stopped believing his version of the story. I stayed up late the night before he came home. The tree glowed in the corner of the living room, soft golds, matte whites, and forest green ribbon, ID hand tied around every branch. ID spent hours arranging candles on the mantel, fluffing the garland, positioning the pine cones like a still life. The table was set for 2 cinnamon sticks tied around linen napkins, a bottle of Pinot Noir breathing quietly on the counter. For a moment, I let myself imagine what I used to believe marriage would feel like. Warm, reverent, reciprocal. But that fantasy died the moment the front door opened. Damon stepped in, flanked by 2 of his so-called co-founders, men who called themselves builders, but couldn't he even carry on a conversation without using buzzwords like scale or disruption? They laughed about something I wasn't meant to understand, then looked around. He stared at the lights, the stockings, the snow, dusted wreaths ID hung on the French doors. "This looks desperate," he said flatly. "Are you trying to make the house look like a Hallmark movie?" His friends chuckled, exchanging a look. One of them muttered, "My mom does this stuff too." I stood at the edge of the kitchen, frozen, one hand still holding the wine opener. The smell of cloves and rosemary filled the room. ID made butternut squash risotto his favorite. It sat untouched on the stove as they wandered into the sunroom to brainstorm over IPA. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I'd been. Later that night, after they left, he didn't apologize. He sat on the edge of our bed, scrolling on his phone, and said, "So, I am heading to my sister's for Christmas. The guys will be there too. That's my real support system right now. They get what I am building." I didn't respond. I waited. And then he added as casually as someone commenting on the weather, "You're just not the kind of wife I envisioned anymore." I didn't cry. I didn't plead or shout or list all the ways I had carried this house, this marriage, this man. I simply stood, walked into the living room, and turned off the tree lights one by one like extinguishing tiny hopes. When he went to bed, I sat at my desk in the dark. The whiteboard in the sunroom still bore his chaotic scribbles. Growth lever, advisory pool, capital loop. I opened our shared digital calendar and scrolled to the 25th of December. My name was listed next to Family Holiday Heart House. I deleted it. Just like that, erased myself from a tradition I had been maintaining alone for years. I wasn't ready to leave that night, but I had stopped waiting for him to notice I was drowning. He wanted a wife who existed quietly between his moods, his ego, his future vision boards. I was not that woman anymore, and if I ever had been, she was gone now, tucked behind the garland, dimmed with the lights. This year, I wasn't decorating for us. I was decorating for the last time. Disappearance doesn't always look like vanishing. Sometimes, it looks like baking banana bread and responding to Slack messages while quietly untangling your life from a man who never thought to ask if you were still breathing beneath the surface. I became a ghost in my own home present. Pleasant, but no longer available for belief. Not in him. Not in us. My first step was legal. I met with an attorney downtown, not the flashy kind, but sharp, discreet. Her office smelled like citrus and calm. I handed her a folder with printouts, account statements, expense logs, screenshots. I didn't cry. I didn't editorialize. She flipped through the documents, nodding occasionally. Then she looked up and said, "Good news, the deed is in your name. He never filed the transfer paperwork." I blinked. "So legally? This house is yours, sole owner. It was a gift before marriage." He never formalized anything. I walked out of her office into the cold December wind with a new kind of clarity. Not relief. Exactly. But leverage. Back home, I got to work. I began documenting every violation, every unexplained transaction, every slurred insult muttered when he thought I was asleep, every time he forwarded my personal emails to his team for convenience. I labeled folders with neutral names, consulting notes, winter archives, schedule drafts. Then I installed a camera in the corner of the study. Small, discreet, motion, triggered. It pointed at my desk, my sunroom reclaimed for surveillance. I wanted to see what he did when I wasn't in the room. I wanted to stop guessing. He didn't notice. He never asked why the printer had moved slightly or why the light near the bookcase suddenly flickered. He was busy. Busy designing an alpha cohort retreat for what he now called his builder collective. He spent hours drafting copy for the website, calling it a curated think tank for innovators on the brink. He referred to himself in third person in drafts. Damon Hart has redefined digital acceleration in founder spaces. I moved money, quietly, gradually, under the guise of year-end tax preparation. I opened a new account, transferred small amounts under benign labels. Quarterly reclass, vendor correction, 2024 prep. I mirrored the patterns of our past filings, so nothing would seem unusual on the surface. I built a mirror version of our financial life, but one he could touch, and still, he didn't notice. He left his empty espresso cups on top of my notebooks. He borrowed my headphones without asking. He made plans without including me, then claimed I never wanted to be part of anything. He had no idea he was speaking to someone who already left. I had stopped reacting, stopped justifying, stopped trying, because I wasn't fighting for the marriage anymore. I was preparing the autopsy, and when the time came, I wouldn't beg for understanding. I wouldn't explain myself. I would simply execute the exit. Clean, legal, final. I wasn't supposed to be home. I had driven 3 hours to see my sister for New Year's last-minute visit. A brief exhale from the tightrope walk of my life. We drank tea, watched old movies, and talked about nothing. I told her everything and nothing all at once. But on New Year's Eve, sometime around 10:45 p.m., I felt it. A familiar tug. Not fear, not suspicion. Readiness. I packed my bag, made up an excuse, and left before midnight. When I pulled into the driveway, our house was glowing, not softly, not quietly. Music throbbed through the windows. Voices spilled into the cold air. Laughter, the reckless kind, bounced off the stone walk I had personally chosen and paid for. He'd dethroned a party, without asking, without a text. Without a single mention, I walked in through the side door, the one near the laundry room no one used. My heels were silent on the wood. The hallway smelled like spilled champagne and cologne. I stayed in the shadows, half curious, half certain. I was about to be proven right again, and then I heard him. He was standing in the living room, half drunk, holding a beer bottle like a trophy. "This house?" he slurred, laughing to 2 other men I didn't recognize. "Yeah, it's mine." "Well, technically, it's in Vivi's name, but let S be real. She's basically a glorified landlord." Laughter. A cheer. Another sip. She doesn't get the vision. No soul, just spreadsheets. Good at taxes, though. He toasted the air, smirking. No one corrected him. No one asked where I was. No one cared. I stood on the staircase, unseen. I didn't breathe. I recorded the entire thing, not for the court. For me, proof not of his infidelity or his financial abuse, but of his contempt. He just stopped loving me. He had erased me. I turned, walked upstairs, and closed the bedroom door behind me with a kind of finality that didn't need noise. That night, while the house pulsed with cheap music and ego downstairs, I laid out 3 envelopes on his desk, crisp, heavy paper. No drama, no blood. The first, legal notice of property rights. A notarized statement verifying sole ownership of the home. Prepared by my attorney. Uncontestable. The second, a letter. No venom. No pleading. Just clarity. You stopped seeing me long before I disappeared. So IV made the decision for both of us. This marriage ends today. And the third, a printout labeled Fraud Exposure Draft. Detailed records of the withdrawals he made under false pretense. Itemized, traced, watermarked. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or slam a door. By morning, he would find them alone. 3 silent detonations. I slept that night with earplugs in, not from noise. From peace, he wanted to make me a ghost. Instead, I became the architect of his reckoning. Sunday morning, 9:14 a.m. Damon left for brunch in a white linen shirt. He hadn't ironed himself, and shoes I bought him last Christmas. I watched him through the curtains as he reversed out of the driveway with music playing, like he hadn't humiliated me in my own home less than 36 hours before. By 9:17, the locksmith arrived. By 9:42, the locks were changed front, side, back, code pad reset. Security camera app updated. My attorney's retainer confirmed. My bank accounts fully rerouted. Everything we once shared was now mine again. Not out of spite. Out of strategy. Out of survival. I swept the entryway, wiped the kitchen counter one last time, and waited by the door with a mug of tea that had gone cold. At 12:03 p.m., his car returned. He strolled toward the front door like nothing had changed. A man with plans, illusions, and a brunch buzz. He stopped when he saw me standing on the threshold, arms crossed. Keys in hand, gaze like glass. He blinked. "Hey, why?" As the lock I changed it. He stared, confused. "What?" "You have 10 minutes, I said, voice calm, "to grab your laptop and leave." He laughed. That soft, patronizing laugh he used when he thought I was being emotional. "Vivi, come on. Don't be dramatic. Let us just talk." I didn't move. He tried again. Okay, I get it. You mad, but don't burn the house down over some party. You knew I was under pressure. 8 minutes. Then came the pivot. "You don't get to do this to me," he snapped. "This is my house too. You think you better than me because you got money? You wouldn't have a strategy career without me encouraging you." 6 minutes. He tried tears next. Real or not, I couldn't tell. "Didn't care. You said you never give up on me." 4 minutes. He stepped forward. I didn't flinch. I just tilted my head slightly and said, softly, "I used to love this house too. But now it smells like your lies." He stood there, stunned, rage rising, crumbling, swirling behind his eyes, like a man slowly realizing the lights had come on in a room he trashed. 2 minutes. He finally went inside, shoulders slack, lips pursed, and returned with just his laptop and charger. No suitcase, no thank you, no apology. He paused on the front steps like he was waiting for something. A crack, a plea. He got nothing. I closed the door behind him with the same care I used to open it, gentle, precise. Final, I didn't cry. I brewed a fresh cup of tea, turned on my speaker, and played Ella Fitzgerald. I curled up on the sofa and listened to the silence. Not empty, just clean. The house no longer echoed with tension. The walls no longer absorbed the weight of unspoken disappointment. It was mine now entirely. Not because I won, because I woken up. By Monday, he was gone. But his noise lingered. Damon crashed at his sister, as the same one who once praised my holiday table settings, and then ghosted me when he failed to show up for our anniversary dinner. Within 48 hours, the whispers started. Thinly veiled texts. muted tones in group chats I never replied to. "What happened?" he said. "You just snapped. I always thought you two were solid. You've been under a lot of stress." "Haven, teat you?" His aunt, the one who never liked that I made more money than he did, sent a message that simply read, "You didn't need to humiliate him like that." Family works through things. I didn't respond. I watched from the safety of my silence as narratives tried to form around me: the unstable wife, the cold-hearted career woman, the one who locked her husband out like a scene from a Lifetime movie. They wanted a villain. And since I de-exited without tears or apology, they nominated me. For a while, I let the rumors breathe, let them shape themselves into half-truths, floated at brunches, and whispered across muted calls. Then, I posted one message: no tags, no drama, just words. I funded his dreams. I lost mine in the process. I paid for the house, managed the books, hid the damage, made it beautiful so no one would ask too many questions. The house was mine, so now it's mine again. That was all. No names, no accusations. Just the facts, cold, calm, unarguable. I expected backlash. What I got was a flood. Private messages, emails, women I hadn't spoken to in years, colleagues, distant cousins, the barista I used to chat with during my morning commute. I needed this. I didn't even know I was in the same situation until I read your post. Thank you for saying it out loud. I thought I was crazy for keeping receipts too. You just gave me permission to leave. And just like that, the tide turned. His supporters went quiet. The group chats lost momentum. Even his sister stopped tagging him in inspo quotes about second chances. Truth has a way of cutting clean, not with rage, but with reality. It doesn't have to scream. It just has to stand. I didn't post again that week. I didn't have to. The house was still, the air lighter. I bought myself tulips, rearranged the bookshelf, opened the windows not because it smelled bad, but because I could. Every so often, the echo of his voice would surface in my memory. "You're not the kind of wife I envisioned." And I would smile. Because I was never built to fit someone else's vision. I was built to outgrow it. The first thing I did was paint the study. The sunroom, once taken over by his standing desk and whiteboards and builder brainstorms, had been empty since he left. I kept the windows open for weeks, letting the space breathe again. I moved the folding table to the garage, hauled out the sad desk chair with the peeling vinyl armrest, rolled up the rug he insisted on because it looked like a co-working vibe. And then, one Saturday morning, I went to the hardware store, alone, and chose a paint called Juniper Ash, deep green, bold, earthy. The color of still forests and velvet blazers and grounding. It took me 2 days to finish. My arms ached, but I didn't rush. With every brushstroke, I felt like I was reclaiming something more than a room. I was painting over interruption, over erasure, over the slow fade of who I used to be. By Sunday night, the space didn't look anything like it had before. It looked like mine. I bought a new desk walnut. Minimal, a plush armchair for reading. I filled the windowsills with plants I'd been too distracted to care for before. Hung art from women I'd followed online for years. And in the center of the room, I placed my old keyboard. I hadn't played in years. He used to say the sound distracted him. Now, there was no one to distract but me. The house began to hum differently after that. Not loud, not lonely, just peaceful. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was generous. The kind of silence that lets you hear yourself think again. I'd wake up and walk barefoot through the kitchen without flinching. I rearranged the furniture to suit my mornings, burned eucalyptus candles at 2 p.m. just because I could, cooked for myself not as performance, but as ritual. 2 weeks after the lockout, I hosted my first gathering. Nothing formal. Just a Friday night invitation to 6 women I'd met, through work, online forums, and mutual friends, founders, creatives, freelancers, women with projects and power and exhaustion behind their eyes. We sat in the living room where he once made jokes about my CFO tendencies. Only this time, the room felt warmer. The light kinder. The conversation real. We didn't talk about breakups or men, not at first. We talked about trademarks, burnout, how hard it is to ask for funding, how imposter syndrome shows up in rooms full of men who interrupt you. We talked about money out loud, with numbers like it wasn't taboo. Someone cried. Someone else laughed so hard she choked on her cider. And when everyone left, hours later, the space felt charged not with anxiety, but with possibility. I rinsed the glasses, blew out the candles, and stood in the hallway for a long moment, just listening. This was what presence felt like. This was what it meant to exist in a space, not because someone let you, but because you chose it. That night, I poured myself a glass of red and sat at the piano. No music sheets, just memory and muscle. My fingers stumbled at first, but the melody came back. A soft, slow tune I used to hum to myself when I lived in a studio apartment with uneven floors and no dishwasher. I played. I sipped. I breathed. And somewhere between the final note and the silence that followed, I smiled, not for anyone else, not for a camera, not for approval, just for me, because I finally understood something he never could. He said I wasn't the wife he wanted. He was right. I became the woman I needed. And that was the real beginning.